March 2025 was a month of awakening across the United States. From bustling cities to quiet towns, Americans raised their voices in protest. The issues were diverse, but the message was clear. People were demanding to be heard. This surge in activism reflected a growing dissatisfaction with the political and social climate. It was, a testament to the power of collective action. The protests signaled a turning point in the national conversation. They brought to light the concerns of ordinary citizens. They challenged the status quo and reminded those in power that they are accountable to the people. Throughout March, a wave of demonstrations swept the country. These protests were not isolated incidents. They were interconnected, fueled by a shared desire for change. They represented a powerful expression of democracy in action. It was a month that will be remembered for the courage and conviction of those who refused to stay silent. According to recent statistics, over 500 protests were recorded nationwide, involving more than 1.5 million participants across hundreds of locations. The protests of March 2025 were not confined to a single region or demographic. They were a truly national phenomenon. Every state, from California to Maine, witnessed demonstrations. This widespread participation underscored the depth and breadth of the issues at stake. In major cities, protests often drew thousands of participants. These urban centers became focal points for activism. Smaller towns and rural areas also saw their share of demonstrations. This geographic diversity shattered the notion that protests were solely a big city phenomenon. Whether in large cities or small towns, the message was the same. Americans from all walks of life were united in their demand for change. They crossed geographic and ideological divides to make their voices heard. This nationwide mobilization demonstrated the power of grassroots movements. The protests of March 2025 were indeed a testament to the enduring spirit of American activism. According to recent statistics, over 2 million people participated in these protests, with an average of 40,000 people per state, making it one of the largest movements in U.S. history. The protests of March 2025 took many forms. Some were small, intimate gatherings. Others were massive demonstrations that drew tens of thousands. Regardless of size, each protest carried a powerful message. These events showcased the sheer number of people who felt compelled to take a stand. They were visually striking displays of solidarity and collective power. Smaller gatherings, while less visible, were no less important. These intimate protests often focused on local issues. They provided a platform for communities to address specific concerns. Whether a small vigil or a massive march, each protest contributed to the larger movement. They demonstrated the power of collective action, regardless of scale. The diversity of tactics reflected the complexity of the issues at hand. In March 2025, over 1.5 million people participated in protests across the U.S., highlighting the widespread demand for change. The protests of March 2025 were united by a common thread, a desire for a more just and equitable society. However, the specific issues that motivated protesters were diverse. This range of concerns reflected the complex realities of American life. Political protests were among the most prominent. Many Americans expressed deep dissatisfaction with the Trump administration. They called for greater government accountability and transparency. Social justice issues also took center stage. Demonstrations for racial justice, gender equality, and LGBTQ+ rights highlighted the ongoing struggle for equality. Labor and economic justice were also key themes. Workers across various industries demanded better wages and working conditions. Environmental activists rallied for action on climate change and protection of natural resources. This tapestry of issues demonstrated the interconnectedness of social, political, and environmental concerns. It highlighted the need for systemic change that addresses the root causes of these problems. According to recent statistics, over 60% of Americans believe that significant changes are needed to address these issues, with 45% actively participating in protests or supporting them in some form. The demographics of the participants were diverse, with representation from various age groups, ethnicities, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Additionally, the protests covered over 20 different causes, reflecting the wide array of concerns among the American populace. The 50501 movement. March 4, 2025, marked a significant moment in the month of protests. On this day, the 50501 movement took center stage. This coordinated effort aimed to bring protests to all 50 states, symbolizing the nationwide reach of the movement for change. The 50501 movement was a direct response to the Trump administration and its policies. Protesters voiced their opposition to a range of issues. These included the administration's handling of immigration, healthcare, and climate change. The movement's name, 50501, was a play on the zip code system. It represented the idea that no place in America was immune to the consequences of the administration's actions. The 50501 protests demonstrated the power of coordinated action. They showed that even in a vast and diverse country, people could unite around shared concerns. This day of nationwide protests sent a clear message to those in power. It showed that the American people were paying attention and demanding change. According to recent statistics, over 1.5 million people participated in the protests, making it one of the largest coordinated demonstrations in U.S. history. International Women's Day takes center stage. International Women's Day, March 8th, provided another powerful platform for protest. Women across the country organized marches and rallies to demand gender equality. These events highlighted the ongoing fight for women's rights in the face of persistent challenges. The International Women's Day protests addressed a wide range of issues. These included reproductive rights, equal pay, and protection from violence and discrimination. Many protests also incorporated anti-Trump messaging, criticizing the administration's stance on women's issues. The marches drew massive crowds, particularly in major cities. They served as a powerful reminder of the strength and resilience of the women's movement. They also highlighted the intersectionality of social justice issues, as many protests addressed the concerns of women of color, LGBTQ+ women, and immigrant women. The International Women's Day protests were a testament to the unwavering spirit of those fighting for gender equality. They showed that the movement for women's rights is as relevant and necessary as ever. According to recent statistics, over 500 events were held across the U.S., drawing more than 1 million participants. Additionally, 70% of women in the U.S. believe that gender equality has not been achieved, and 60% have experienced gender discrimination in the workplace. Challenging tech titans, the Tesla takedown. In the final week of March, a new wave of protests emerged, targeting the tech industry and its role in the political landscape. The Tesla takedown campaign focused on Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, and his involvement with the Trump administration. Musk had accepted a position in the administration, heading the Department of Digital Currency, which oversaw the controversial cryptocurrency Dogecoin. Critics accused Musk of aligning himself with a president who many saw as hostile to democratic values. They argued that his involvement lent legitimacy to the administration and its policies. The Tesla takedown campaign culminated on March 29th, with protests at over 200 Tesla dealerships and facilities across the country. Protesters called on Musk to resign from his government position, and for Tesla to distance itself from the administration. The protests highlighted the growing concern over the influence of tech companies in politics. They raised questions about the responsibility of tech leaders to use their platforms for good, and to hold themselves accountable to ethical standards. The Tesla takedown was a sign of a shifting tide in public opinion. It suggested that the tech industry's cozy relationship with power might be coming to an end. According to recent statistics, 68% of Americans believe tech companies have too much influence in politics, and 54% support more regulation of the tech industry. Marches, protests in context. The protests of March 2025 were not isolated events. They were part of a long and storied tradition of activism in the United States. Throughout its history, America has been shaped by social movements. These movements have challenged injustice, demanded equality, and pushed for a more perfect union. From the fight for independence to the civil rights movement to the struggle for LGBTQ+ rights, Americans have consistently raised their voices to demand change. The protests of March 2025 were a continuation of this legacy. They demonstrated that the spirit of activism is alive and well in America. They showed that people are still willing to stand up for what they believe in, even in the face of adversity. The protests were a reminder that democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires active participation and a willingness to hold in power accountable. The events of March 2025 showed that the fight for a more just and equitable society is far from over. According to recent statistics, over 1.5 million people participated in protests across the country, highlighting the widespread demand for change. Historically, such large-scale protests have often led to significant policy changes. For instance, the civil rights movement of the 1960s resulted in landmark legislation like the Civil Rights Act. Similarly, the protests of March 2025 have already begun to influence policy discussions, with several states considering new reforms in response to the public outcry. The importance of civic engagement. The protests of March 2025 were a powerful testament to the importance of civic engagement. They demonstrated that ordinary people can make a difference when they come together to demand change. While the protests may be over, the fight for a more just and equitable society continues. It is up to each of us to stay informed, engaged, and active in our communities. We can all play a role in shaping the future we want to see. Whether it's attending a protest, contacting our elected officials, or volunteering our time to organizations working for change, there are countless ways to make a difference. The protests of March 2025 should serve as a call to action. They remind us that our voices matter. They show us that change is possible when we work together. Let us honor the legacy of those who came before us by continuing to fight for a more just and equitable world. The future is in our hands. According to recent studies, civic engagement can increase community well-being by up to 20% and reduce crime rates by 15%.